Welcome to UFO. I'm Doug Moffat.
And I'm Bill Chalker.
In this episode, we'll be looking at Bill's investigation of Frederick Birmingham's vision of 1868. We'll be back after this. Bill, what steps did you take to determine the authenticity of Frederick Birmingham's account?
Well, the first priority I had was to establish that Frederick Birmingham was a real person to begin with, and I established that pretty quickly by going to the major state library here, and I found sort of maps and survey diagrams by Birmingham. I verified that everything that was in this diary memorandum book that we'd found was actually all factually correct. There were no anachronisms, no errors, nothing that I could detect within the actual account itself that was inconsistent with what I was able to find out from the historically real person. So that made it extremely interesting, and then I started tracking down some of the people that were associated with the construction of this copy that I had, and I verified through them a detailed account of how this diary came into the hands of the party that gave it to me back in 1975. And so I was able to establish with some considerable certainty that this document certainly went back before 1947, which is really important in the sense that that was the year that flying saucers took off in a big way. And so if it was going to be a flying saucer literary hoax, etc., you'd expect it to have been constructed after 1947, and this certainly predated 1947 by many, many years.
Were you surprised to find the very place where the incident took place?
Yeah, that was a real bonus, to be able to find that the place where it actually occurred still existed as part of the Australian National Trust, etc., to be able to stand on the veranda in the very place where it all happened, basically, and that was really exciting.
Okay, what linked Parramatta Park in your investigation?
Yeah, apart from the fact that the events played out in the story occurred in Parramatta Park, what I was able to find was that we traced the document back to a Wallace Hayward, who was a school teacher that lived right on the edge of the highest point of Parramatta Park. Now, we weren't able to establish what the connection was, but it certainly links it in to Parramatta Park, both the actual story itself and the actual history of the document as we tried to unravel it over the years.
Bill, here we are at Parramatta Park where the memorandum book locates the events. How did you come to this manuscript or memorandum book?
Well, I came upon it when it was given to me by the Honorary President of the Sydney-based UFO Investigation Centre, Fred Phillips. He got it while he was doing the papers of a friend of his, tax papers, and she actually came upon it, or she wasn't certain how she got hold of it, but she certainly had it since about the late 1950s, and on it, it indicated that it was a copy of Birmingham's original memorandum book, and there were a number of people listed on that that actually worked on producing that copy. Now, I was able to very quickly locate the gentleman who was indicated as having coordinated the copying of the manuscript. That was Tas Homan, who was a gentleman who was involved with the UFO group back at that time during the 50s. He was a very difficult chap to deal with in terms of trying to get to the facts of the matter, but I was eventually able to locate who gave it to him, and that was Marjorie Essling and Mrs. Delonte. Now, that Mrs. Delonte was a registered nurse, and she was providing health care to an ailing wife of a school teacher from Parramatta by the name of Wallace Hayward, and by coincidence he lived in a house called The Grange, which is located just up here in the general area of the highest point of Parramatta Park. So it kind of invites the speculation, well, maybe given the locality, there might have been some sort of connection between Hayward and Birmingham, who eventually died in about 1892. But that connection I haven't been able to establish, but certainly it makes for some fairly compelling, interesting historical anecdotes there anyway.
Right, at what point of your investigation did you start to feel confident this wasn't a contemporary literary hoax?
Well, certainly one of the features that really resonated very powerfully for me was the fact that in the memorandum book it describes the events as occurring in Ducks Lane, Parramatta, and when I saw that, I looked up the local current maps, etc., and I saw that there was no Ducks Lane in Parramatta Park, and immediately I thought there was some sort of evidence for a historical or local current hoax, etc., and then I found that there were some old maps in the major library here in Sydney, and as it turns out, Ducks Lane was renamed Trott Street in about the early 1870s. So this sits in very well with the dating of Birmingham's manuscript, and it's a fairly obscure detail. Given the fact that I was able to take back the dating of the memorandum book to at least into the early 40s with some degree of confidence, when it was in the hands of Wallace Hayward. How long he had it for, I have no idea, but certainly it goes back before the modern day fascination with flying saucers. So from that point of view, I'm kind of fairly comfortable with the fact that we're dealing with a legitimate historical document, particularly given that none of the facts, and these are very obscure facts, about Birmingham and about Parramatta and all that kind of thing, were all historically correct.
Now, there were some pretty tragic circumstances in regarding the original memorandum book that you came across. Yes, as soon as I was able to establish that Tas Homan, the member of the UFO group, actually had the original memorandum book in his possession, I set about trying to get him to hand it over, or at least give me a look at it. He kept denying that he actually had it, but I eventually determined that he did have the diary. And then he died, and when I was just trying to establish who had access to his estate, etc., through a number of problems, etc., I was not able to determine for a year or so who the actual beneficiaries were, and when I found that out, it turned out that the beneficiary who got most of Homan's material had no particular interest in anything that Homan was into, and this included flying saucers and UFOs, and threw most of this away and burnt it. So we've left with the, I guess the tragedy of the fact that maybe Birmingham's original manuscript is burnt, or I kind of live in hope that maybe one day it may resurface. So this original memorandum book was held in families for perhaps 100 years or more without anybody really taking notice of this or taking any interest in it. Yeah. There could be presumably a goldfield of information out there with our viewers, with information relating to this sort of historical stuff, which would give us a much greater insight into the mind of these experiences in that era. Yeah, there's no doubt that there are lots of material out there, and I've come across several examples of it myself, where people have locked away in their family histories, or up in their attics or in their basements, etc., historical information that relates to unusual UFO-related events, etc., and the 1868 Birmingham UFO vision story is just a classic example of just that kind of thing, that where a bit of investigation can lead to some really quite striking information that resonates and reflects upon the modern UFO phenomenon. So if you're watching this program, after the program, get up into your attics and down in your basements and start looking for some of these old documents that might be lurking there. That's right, Bill. If we all dig into our attics, who knows what gems we'll come up with. Well, that's it for this show. We'll see you next time on UFO.